July 28, 1944. Near Saint-Lô, France. The rain had finally stopped, but nobody in Sergeant Daniel Mercer's platoon felt relieved. They had been trapped for 3 days. 3 days behind German lines. 3 days without proper food. 3 days listening to enemy trucks move through the darkness around them. Nobody knew why they were still alive. The hedgerows that covered the Norman countryside had become their prison. Private Tommy Reed sat with his rifle across his knees, staring at a small French farmhouse nearly 200 yards away. A candle flickered inside. Someone was there. A family. Or Germans. No one knew. "We can't stay here much longer," Reed whispered. Mercer didn't answer. He was studying a map that had become little more than wet paper. Their unit had been separated during an attack. Radio destroyed. Supply lines gone. No way to contact American forces. And now German patrols were tightening around them. Then something happened. A small figure emerged from the farmhouse. A little girl, maybe 10 years old. She stood in the open field, looking directly at them. The Americans froze. No one moved. The girl slowly raised one hand, not waving, pointing toward the east. Then she disappeared back into the house. The soldiers looked at each other. No one understood, but every man felt the same thing. Something was about to happen, and none of them knew whether it would save them or kill them. The hours dragged on. Clouds rolled overhead. The silence became unbearable. Private Carl Benson kept watching the farmhouse. "What if she's warning us?" "About what?" asked Reed. "I don't know." Mercer finally folded the ruined map. "We move at dark." No one argued, because there were no better options. As evening approached, strange sounds drifted across the fields. Engines. Many engines. Mercer crawled toward a break in the hedgerow and carefully looked beyond. His stomach tightened. German vehicles. At least 30. Moving west. Toward the area where American forces were expected to attack. An entire armored column. The Americans stared. They had accidentally discovered something important. Very important. The Germans were preparing a major movement. But trapped behind enemy lines, the information was useless. Unless they survived. Darkness finally arrived. Mercer gathered his men. 23 soldiers remained. Dirty. Hungry. Exhausted. Scared. "We move east." "Toward the girl's signal?" Benson asked. Mercer nodded. "Only lead we've got." Nobody liked the answer. But nobody had a better one. The men slipped through the darkness. Every sound felt dangerous. Every shadow looked like a German soldier. Hours passed. Then came the gunfire. A single shot. Then another. Then a burst from a machine gun. Private Miller collapsed instantly. No scream. No warning. 1 second alive. The next gone. "Move!" Mercer shouted. The night exploded. German patrols opened fire from multiple directions. Tracers cut through the darkness. Men dove into ditches. Mud sprayed everywhere. The Americans fired back desperately. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. It felt like 10 years. When it ended, 4 Americans were dead. 3 wounded. The survivors scattered. Separated again. Mercer found himself with only 9 men. The others were missing. Or captured. Or worse. Nobody knew. The survivors hid inside an abandoned barn before dawn. No one spoke. Private Reed finally broke the silence. "We aren't getting out, are we?" Nobody answered. Because everyone was thinking the same thing. The next morning brought another surprise. A knock. 3 slow knocks. Every rifle immediately aimed at the door. The door creaked open. An elderly French farmer stepped inside. Behind him stood the little girl from the farmhouse. The same girl. The room went silent. The farmer raised both hands. No Germans. A young American corporal named Joseph Hart spoke enough French to translate. The farmer's name was Henri Laurent. The girl's name was Elise. And they had been watching the trapped Americans for days. Henri pointed toward a rough map drawn on cloth. He explained that several American prisoners had been captured nearby, still alive, being held at a German command post. The barn became silent. Mercer stared. "American prisoners?" Henri nodded. 12. One of the wounded soldiers looked up. 12. Hart translated. Henri confirmed it. 12 Americans, waiting for transport deeper into Germany. The room grew heavy, because everyone understood the implication. Those prisoners probably wouldn't survive the war. Not if they disappeared into the German prison system. Mercer looked around. His men looked exhausted, hungry, outnumbered, and already trapped. Yet nobody said what they were all thinking. Finally Reed spoke. "We can't leave them." Nobody disagreed. The rescue plan was insane. Even Mercer knew it. But war often forced impossible decisions. That night they moved again, guided by Henri. Through orchards, fields, streams, hidden paths known only to locals. Near midnight they reached a wooded ridge overlooking the German position. The Americans studied it carefully. Several buildings, guard towers, vehicles, searchlights. Too many Germans. Far too many. Private Benson shook his head. This is suicide. Mercer kept watching. Maybe it was. But 12 American soldiers sat somewhere inside that compound. Waiting, hoping, praying. The decision came quietly. We go. Nobody cheered. Nobody smiled. The men simply checked their weapons. Because that was what soldiers did. At 2:17 a.m., the attack began. A stolen German grenade landed beside a guard tower. The explosion shattered the night. American rifles opened fire. German soldiers rushed from buildings. Chaos erupted instantly. Searchlights swung wildly. Machine guns hammered the darkness. Mercer's men moved fast. Too fast for the Germans to organize. They reached the prisoner building within minutes. Private Reed kicked open the door. Inside sat 12 exhausted American prisoners. For a moment nobody moved. The prisoners stared, almost unable to believe what they were seeing. Then one whispered, "Americans." Reed grinned. "Last time I checked." The room exploded with relief. Some laughed. Some cried. One prisoner simply sat there staring, unable to process it. But escape would not be easy. German reinforcements were already arriving. The Americans began withdrawing. Wounded men were carried. Others stumbled beside them. Bullets ripped through trees. The darkness flashed with gunfire. Several times it seemed impossible. Several times men nearly surrendered to exhaustion. But somehow they kept moving. Hour after hour, mile after mile, until finally, just before sunrise, they reached American lines. The sight nearly broke them. American tanks. American flags. American voices. Safety. For the first time in days, the trapped soldiers knew they would live. The rescued prisoners were rushed to medical stations. Officers demanded explanations. Reports began moving upward. One headquarters, then another, then another. The details stunned everyone. A trapped platoon. A civilian family risking execution. A rescue mission conducted deep behind enemy lines. An important German armored movement discovered. Within 48 hours, the story had reached higher command. Much higher. Eventually, it reached General George Patton. Days later, Mercer and several survivors were ordered to report to a command facility. No one knew why. The room felt tense. Officers stood quietly. Maps covered the walls. The soldiers waited. Then the door opened. Everyone immediately stood straighter. General Patton entered. The room went silent. Patton looked older than the photographs. Tired. Focused. Dangerous. Not because he shouted. Because he didn't need to. His presence alone changed the room. He walked slowly toward the soldiers. Nobody spoke. Patton paused. His eyes moved from face to face. He saw the bandages. The exhaustion. The missing men who weren't standing there. He knew what they had endured. Finally he spoke. His voice stayed calm. "You were ordered to survive." "Yes, sir," Mercer replied. Patton nodded. Then he looked directly at him. "But that's not what you did." Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed loudly. Patton continued. "You found intelligence. You protected civilians. You rescued American prisoners. You brought your men home." The soldiers said nothing. Patton paused again. Everyone waited. Then something unexpected happened. The general reached into his pocket. He unfolded a small note. "The French family." Mercer looked up. "Sir." Patton held up the paper. "The girl. Elise." The room stayed silent. Patton nodded slowly. "Because of her warning, our forces were able to prepare for that German armored movement." Nobody had known. Not even Mercer. Patton looked toward the window. For a moment his expression changed. Not softer. Just thoughtful. "There are heroes in uniform." He paused. "And there are heroes without one." No one spoke. Patton looked back at the soldiers. "The war is full of destruction." His voice remained calm. "But every now and then somebody reminds us what we're fighting for." The room felt different now. Heavier. More personal. Patton stepped closer. "I've seen courage. A lot of courage." He pointed toward the men. "What you did wasn't courage because you attacked." He paused. "It was courage because you could have left those prisoners behind." The room stayed silent. Patton nodded once. But you didn't. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Patton extended his hand toward Mercer. The soldiers watched in disbelief. Mercer shook it. A simple gesture, but one he would remember for the rest of his life. The meeting ended shortly afterward. No grand ceremony. No dramatic speeches. Just soldiers returning to war. As Mercer left the building, he thought about the men who hadn't made it. Private Miller. The others lost in the darkness. The prisoners who had almost vanished into captivity. And a little French girl standing in a field, pointing east. Years later, veterans would remember the battle differently. Some remembered the firefight. Some remembered the rescue. Some remembered meeting Patton. But many remembered something else. A lesson learned in one of history's darkest wars. That courage is not always found in victory. Sometimes it appears in exhausted soldiers who refuse to abandon each other. Sometimes it appears in civilians who risk everything for strangers. And sometimes it appears in difficult decisions made when nobody is watching. War reveals the worst parts of humanity. But every now and then, it reveals the best parts too. And in the summer of 1944, behind enemy lines in France, a handful of soldiers, a brave family, and one determined little girl proved that even in the middle of war, humanity could still survive. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories where humanity, war, and difficult decisions collided, make sure to subscribe.